They're back. DraftKings contributor Kenny Ducey and Rotowire's Nick Whalen chasing or fading the following bets on tonight's 3-game NBA playoff slate. So, Kenny, the Bucks are up 2-0 on the Heat after dismantling them in Game 2, 132-98. Ouch. Milwaukee is only a 1.5-point favorite tonight in Game 3, so chase or fade that they easily cover the spread.
It's a really, really tough one because a lot of times when you see a line like this, you want to believe, well, it's just too good to be true. But honestly, I do think that this is a spot where I'm looking to target the Bucks. I just think that in general, they got so much better from Game 1 to Game 2, especially when you look at the defensive end of things. The Miami Heat ran out of ideas, really, on offense. They just got dominated. On the glass, Bam Adebayo, another so-so game. If you remember last year during the bubble, Bam Adebayo was, one of the driving forces behind really why this team was so successful and so able to penetrate some of the hardest defenses in the league too, like the Bucks. And right now, we're just not seeing that same kind of punch from this offense on the Miami Heat side. The scoring has really just been an issue. And so for that reason, I just think that the Bucks, if you give them an advantage on that side of the ball, on the offensive side of the ball, I just think this is over. I think that this could be a sweep for sure. The Heat, I just think, are not the same team that we saw in the bubble a year ago. And once again, I'm just really struggling to understand where the offense is going to come from here. The bigs are just not going to be able to produce the way. I mean, Dwayne Dedmon's not going to be the answer here, right? And without the shooting that we saw last year as well that got them so far, they might be a one-hit wonder here, Jesse. I just don't think they even win a game in this series.
Nick, what do you think?
I think Miami takes one of these next two and Milwaukee probably wins the series in 5. But man, what we saw in Game 2 was just a complete dismantling. Like Kenny said, I mean, Game 1 looked a lot like last year's series. And I truly believe if Milwaukee had not pulled out Game 1, that some of the alarm bells maybe would have started to sound and, guys start playing a little more tense. And I don't think we get the performance from Milwaukee that we got in Game 2. But the Bucks in some ways, I think are kind of a front running team. And, they feel a lot more comfortable when they're up 2-0 instead of down 0-2 or tied 1-1, where you kind of feel like you have to win a game. And when they play loose and they can get their shooters going, they're really, really hard to stop. And that's exactly what we saw on Monday night in Game 2. Now, are Bryn Forbes and Pat Connaughton going to combine to hit 11 three-pointers? Probably not. But when you look at the shooting for guys like Giannis, Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton, it hasn't been all that good. I think Giannis is like 1 of 10 from 3. And he's not exactly Kyle Korver, but he could do better than that. So I think some regression from the Bucks bench is probably offset by maybe some progression from some of their stars.
All right, the Lakers are the biggest favorites of the night, -7 against the Suns. Chase or fade that they cover this spread, Nick?
For me, this comes down 100% to Chris Paul's health, because if Chris Paul is limited like he was in Game 2, I think the Lakers have a little momentum. I think they're at home. They'll be a lot more comfortable, and they probably do cover the spread. If Chris Paul is back to being the Chris Paul that's probably going to make second or third team All-NBA and maybe finish top 5 in MVP voting, then I think the Suns have a really good chance to compete and probably cover that 7-point number, which is a little bit higher than I expected, honestly, based on what we've seen from the Lakers through these first 2 games. Earlier in the show, Kenny hit on how big of an issue the Lakers shooting has been. They're shooting 32% on what NBA.com/stats defines as open or wide open shots. They're 3 of 18 from 3 on shots that are defined as open. That's far and away the worst of any team in the playoffs. Guys like Kyle Kuzma, Wes Matthews, Alex Caruso, KCP, Taylor Horton-Tucker, all those guys have been horrendous so far for the Lakers. So there's a chance they turn that around at home. Maybe the law of averages implies that they'll kind of come back to the mean, but if those guys aren't hitting shots, it's just really hard for the Lakers to score.
Yeah, Kenny, do you think that this is kind of about Chris Paul here?
I mean, of course it is. Yes, Chris Paul, everyone sort of turned their attention back towards the Lakers once he got hurt. I still think that, this team, the Suns, they're just teetering on the brink of a disaster. And what I mean by that is, I don't know what sort of cliche you want to use. They're running on fumes right now. But when you look at how this team is staying in these games, and, they did end up winning Game 1, right? But it's a different team now without Chris Paul, or at least 100% Chris Paul. DeAndre Ayton is having a decent go of it, but I do think that, his advantage is starting to dissipate with the strength that the Lakers are starting to impose on the glass. You look at a guy like Cam Payne hitting all these shots, right? He kept them in Game 2 for a while. And they've been relying so heavily on Devin Booker to score the basketball. If any one of these components, any one of those three components suddenly disappears, if DeAndre Ayton struggles to be the force down low that he has been all season, if Campaign, manages to flop here and go 2 for 10 from the field, which is absolutely possible, knowing Campaign over his career, or Devin Booker suddenly has a bad scoring night, this team is going to go from like competitive to non-competitive against the Lakers, because the Lakers have so much upward mobility here, Jesse. They can get so much better. They're starting to get better. And like Nick mentioned with the open jumpers, they have so many shooters that are they're just stinking up the joint right now. Wes Matthews, KCP, and Kyle Kuzma all have been terrible. And if just one of those guys manages to hit a few, I mean, you're talking about a huge swing in the other direction with the Suns. Maybe they lose one of those key components there, which hasn't really been a consistent thing all season long. And maybe the Lakers get one of their shooters to start stepping up. I think that this could completely turn and the Lakers could win a huge, huge game here in huge fashion.
All right, highest total belongs to the Nuggets visiting the Blazers, 227.5. Kenny, chase your fade. This one hits the over cash in each of the first 2 games in the Mile High City.
I'll go under. I mean, look, you look at game 2, and it was really just the total cash because of one huge quarter. It was the second quarter, and I don't know if you remember, Damian Lillard hit everything he looked at in that quarter, and the Nuggets just answered right back. It was a very fast-paced quarter. Other than that, these teams kind of were settled down. I think that in general, we're going to see a lot more post play in this one. The Portland Trailblazers were fourth. I know they take a lot of threes. I know it's silly to say this, right? They take some of the most threes in the league. But when you look at Jusuf Nurkic, he was in foul trouble that whole game. And I do think that they need to go to a more high percentage look more often to stay in these games. I think that they know that. And so I do think that Nurkic is going to be a little more featured in this Portland offense, which is going to take away some of the 3-point attempts, which in turn is going to take away some of the scoring in this game. And don't knock the Blazers defense. It was league average over the last 15 games of the regular season. They made a lot of improvements on that side when Nurkic and McCollum got healthy. I think this defense is better than people give it credit for. I think we could see definitely like a 109 to 104 game.
Nick, you want to go with the under?
I think I'm going to go over. Both games, like you said, in this series have gone over so far. They've both been over this 227.5 number as well. I think we see a better game from Michael Porter Jr. I think that obviously boosts the Nuggets scoring total. As far as Damian Lillard and Nikola Jokic go, those guys, you could kind of just pencil them in for what they've been doing so far. Maybe Lillard isn't quite as red hot from 3, but I think he's very capable of putting up 40 in every game in this series. It's going to come down to whether the role players are hitting shots, for both sides. And, you can't depend on Lillard to give you 8 or 9 threes himself, but the Blazers bench gave them almost nothing in game 2. Carmelo Anthony was really bad. He was 1 of 5. They got nothing from Anthony Simons, who actually played pretty well in game 1. Norman Powell, who's a starter, didn't shoot the ball well either. So, even if you think Lillard maybe takes a slight step back, I think the Blazers can get a little more from their bench. And the other thing is Portland turned the ball over 21 times in that game. So I think that number comes down, and that also helps them boost their point total.
All right, guys, we want to give you plenty of time for this one. So we're going to jump down to Slate approved pick. Nick, what is your favorite bet tonight? You can take your time here.
All right, well, I'll throw out a couple. In that case, then Dennis Schroeder over 14.5 points. I touched on him earlier in the show, was really bad down the stretch, was really bad in game 1, looked a lot more like himself in game 2. I think asking him to get to 15 points for a guy who's really aggressive and, can get to the rack, can shoot threes, is never afraid to take a shot. I think that's a pretty friendly number. DeAndre Ayton over 14.5 points. It does feel like there's kind of this general expectation that he can't keep up what he's been doing so far. And efficiency wise, I think that's probably the case. He's not going to keep shooting like 90% from the field for the series. But again, 14.5 to me seems a little bit low based on the quality of the looks that he's been getting so far. So I do like him to go over. And then looking a little bit longer term on the DraftKings Sportsbook, you can get Kevin Durant right now at 4-1 to win Finals MVP. And maybe this is more of an indictment on the Boston Celtics, but if you've watched that series whatsoever, especially game 2, the Brooklyn Nets look unstoppable. And more often than not, the Finals MVP kind of defaults to the best player on the winning team. And right now, I feel pretty confident that the Nets are at least going to make the finals. They'd be my pick to win it. And Kevin Durant is the best player on that team. I think this number probably only, creeps down and down as the playoffs go on. So getting KD right now at plus 400 feels pretty good.
All right, Kenny, Slate approved pick time.
Not believing in the Knicks after last night to win the East? No, I'm just kidding. I like 3.
Are you?
No, I'm not. But I mean, yes, but no, right? I like 3 bets here in this Trailblazers Nuggets game. I'm going to give you 2 right now, 2 props that I really like. I like both Damian Lillard and Yusuf Nurkic to have a double-double. You get Lillard at plus 150, Nurkic a little more, a little less modest at minus 148. But I still think minus 148 for Nurkic to have a double-double is a really good deal when you look at the fact that he only played 24 minutes last game. He still did have double-digit rebounds, and he's had double-digit rebounds now in 4 of his last 5 games. I think there's a little bit of an overreaction here to the fact that he only scored 7 points and he had another 7-point outing. And I mean, this guy is pretty much a lock to have double-digit points. And when you look at the fact that he's been so aggressive on the board, so important to this team down the stretch, I think that he's going to go back to playing around 33, 34 minutes in this game. He should easily hit a double-double here. Lillard, on the other hand, I'm really interested in the fact that he's had 3 straight games with double-digit assists. And I mean, obviously that's what you're looking at here because he's going to have more than 10 points, or 9. But you're looking really at the whole season. He's gone on these binges, right, where he just goes for double-digit assists. I think that there's going to be a whole lot of ball movement here, a whole lot of up-tempo play. I know that I said I like the under, but I do think that Lillard's going to be dishing that ball around. He's going to be the primary ball handler. And sometimes we've seen CJ McCollum, be the guy who's going to be the assist man for this team during the regular season. So I do think that Lillard is taking over that role and can get double-digit assists tonight. So I like that value at plus 150. And then in general, I think the Blazers cover this game. It's been a disaster betting them against the spread at home this year, but I do think that they have a lot of edges here over the Nuggets. The rebounding edge was present in their last game, despite the fact that Nurkic was out for most of the game with foul trouble. I think that as long as he plays, and you'd think that he would, more minutes in this game, they're going to have a really easy time of it, considering the fact that they have someone to combat Jokic on the glass. I think that they cover this game pretty easily. The Nuggets, they see a little bit of regression in their shooting numbers. They shot over 55% last game. Come on, get real. They're not going to do that again.